Enjoy this Wild Soul Gathering production. I'm Dr. Sandra Marie. Pour yourself a really tall glass of spiritual curiosity and join me for the Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious podcast. In the spirit of happy hour, cheers to some new insights, peace, revitalization, and perhaps an aha moment that may change your life. Wow, everyone, what a great summit this has been. I am still really in awe of the information, the wisdom shared, everything that's happened over the last 3 days. It has just been beautiful and amazing. And now we're ready for our final presentation. I can't believe that we're at the final presentation. Divine Messages and Grounded Spirituality. It almost sounds perfect for this. And we're going to have the very wise and gifted Sonee Singh. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. And I'm so honored to be the person who's closing this amazing summit off. So thank you for having me to do that.
Yeah, no worries. You felt truly like the perfect energy when I was setting this up. So I'm going to go right back at you. Thank you. A little bit of a quick introduction for you. Sonee, you describe yourself as a cross-cultural seeker of deep knowing. I love that statement. I feel like I could just talk an hour on that statement alone. You hold multiple degrees and certifications, and you are a Doctor of Divinity, an award-winning author. You have done amazing work with your writing, a novelist, a poet. Can you share a little bit about yourself, your journey? How did you move from the hospitality industry into what you're doing now? Because there seems to be a huge gap between the two.
There does. Although for me, it was a very, I'm going to say natural progression, even though it doesn't necessarily seem like it was a natural progression. But I did get into hospitality, loving travel. And travel has been such a huge part of my life, not just my identity, who I am as a person, but just the journeys that I've gone on. That's why cross-cultural seeker is part of, what I call myself, I guess. It was the love of exploring and seeking this pursuit for knowledge that I always have and have had. That led me into wanting to express myself in different ways, creatively, through writing stories and then through poems. So most people are like, how does one go from there to something completely different? But to me, it seemed to flow quite well.
Wow. That's amazing. I guess we all have things in our lives, and when it's personal to us, it all makes sense to how it flows versus, when you're hearing it secondhand or just hearing about it. So I want to talk a little bit about your writing. You write stories of self-discovery to encourage people to accept themselves for who they are and live life on their own terms. Now, I have to say that sounds like a big undertaking and a huge commitment of service to others, especially in what can feel like a very chaotic and fast-paced world where we are messaged constantly on how to look and how to act and how a woman should be. I mean, the messages just shoot at us, especially with social media and all of these things. Can you talk a little bit? I'm going to call it your path of service. Maybe that's not what you call it. Talk a little bit about those books and your writing.
Well, what I have discovered in my own personal journey, particularly my own spiritual journey, is that the key to connecting with your intuition, with embracing your spiritual life, is embracing who you are as a person, embracing your uniqueness, getting to know yourself, because in getting to know yourself is how you connect with your intuition, how you express who you are, and also how you're able to connect and make a difference to others. But also that, it's sort of the pursuit of what we all supposedly seek, which is happiness and fulfillment. And it's in being ourselves that we finally get to that point. But it's really hard because of what you said. There's all these influences, not just what's in the media, but in our families, in our friends, culture, society, and what's in our immediate environment. And so I realized that for me, for instance, when I started to focus on myself and try to understand who I am, that's when my awakening came out. I recognized through my personal journey that that's what is involved with a lot of people. And so I thought, for me to share this message, that's what I wanted to focus on, these pivotal moments in the characters in my novels that they go through where they let go of expectations, let go of what's holding them back, and truly embrace who they are. And it's in that moment that they find a difference or change their lives or something significant happens. Yeah, that's sort of how I started writing those stories.
Okay, that's it. People relate to that, and I'm sure it brings a lot of aha moments for people. When would you say your passion or commitment to writing started? Like, was it something? Was it a message for you, or how did it all start? I know that you write poems, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously you have shared many of your poems throughout the summit that we've recorded and we've been throwing in there. So thank you very much for that. Did you start first with the poems and then get into the novels? Was there a process, or what is it? How did that all work for you?
Well, that was actually part of me accepting myself and awakening towards myself, because writing has been a part of my life always since I was a little girl,
Really?
but I never gave myself the permission to be a writer.
Okay.
And so I would write stories and was always interested in writing fictional stories, wrote short stories, but they didn't go anywhere. I didn't show them to anyone. I didn't tell anyone that I was doing it. And when I started recognizing that really my happiness was in being who I am and who I am as a writer and sharing my voice through writing, that all kind of came together. So writing and my spiritual awakening all happened around the same time in a way that I did not expect, because I didn't set out to be a writer. I sort of had given up on the idea when I was a child and thought, this is just not something I'm going to pursue. And what how that began for me was a quest to connect with my intuition, because I'd heard people say, and you know follow your intuition, your intuition never fails you, but I didn't know what that meant. I didn't even know what the word intuition was. And so when I said, okay, I don't know how this is going to happen, but I need to figure out what intuition is and how I'm going to follow it, it all started evolving together. A lot of my intuition and the discovery of it happened through writing, and it wasn't intentional. It wasn't that I sat down and I said, oh, I'm going to discover it. It was just because I have the habit of writing that through my writing I started figuring things out about myself. Even you know if, for instance, the answer to the question is that people often ask, what would you do if you know you didn't need to be paid to do it, but it would just give you joy? And that to me was writing. And so that's how it all evolved. And it started right around the time that you and I met. So it was, in fact, a year before then, 2018, because I think you and I met 2019. So it's been recent. And I started with writing novels, and then eventually started writing poems. And poems came out through the same way. This practice that I have of writing every day, I recognized that a lot of my writing was lyrical. And when I started taking them out of sentences into stanzas, I recognized, oh, what? That's a poem. And once I embraced poetry, then the poetry started flowing on its own.
I love it that you embrace. That's really interesting. So I have to ask you, because it's not been that long, 5 or 6 years. How many books have you put out since then? I feel like you
Five.
have been a writing machine, because I mean these are significant award-winning books.
They are, and I've been blessed in that sense that I've published 5 books, not one per year. And one year, I think one year I ended up publishing 3, and that's a lot of it ended up happening during COVID because of the lockdowns. It was sort of prime time when I didn't really have very many other distractions, and so I really got a lot of writing out during that time. And so from COVID, I think I ended up with 3 poetry books, which is what I shared over the last few days, some of the poems from those books.
Wow, that's really beautiful. So one of the things that I'll share with you is when we were putting together the summit, we went with Spirituality Explained, really feeling that a lot of people are awakening or becoming more aware, definitely becoming more curious, and having a lot of questions. So it seemed to make sense to bring together, I'll call it an eclectic group of people with different information versus just sticking to one topic and talking about that for 3 days to expose people to what's out there, because what speaks to one obviously doesn't speak to the other a lot of times.
Mhm.
What was interesting retrospectively as I was talking to the presenters and getting the commitments was intuition came up with every single one of you guys. All 17 of you talked about intuition and somehow wanted to infuse intuition into the work. And it was almost like, did I not get the message right? I feel like I got the message right enough, but it fascinates me. And here we are with you being closing this down, so to speak, this energy that's out there
Right.
in a way. And again, we're back to intuition. I just wanted to share that because that's fascinating to me that intuition ended up being such a significant part of that. And that being said, it's something to pay attention to. And it's really, for me, it's something to pay attention to as I'm putting myself out there publicly, providing offerings to different people that are available, that there's a big thing with intuition at this particular point in time. So I think I'm talking to myself when I say pay attention to that. That being said, I know you've been writing a lot, but I feel like you've been traveling a lot also the last 5 years. Has that been connected to your spiritual journey or what that's all about? And Thailand?
Mhm.
You've been in Thailand?
I have. Yeah. So the interesting thing with my spiritual journey is part of it has been seeking a place for me to settle. When the lockdown started with COVID, I was living in Charleston, South Carolina, and I ended up having to move to Idaho to be with my parents during the time of the lockdowns. And I knew I didn't want to stay in Idaho. And so it was, I had this open question of where should I live in the world? And so I've done a lot of exploration and have been traveling quite a bit. I have been looking at places close to the ocean because that's where I find my tranquility and my healing. And so Thailand is where I've ended up this year, although I don't know if I'm going to stay. I don't know if that's it. The answers as to, where I go or what direction to travel in have been through my intuition. And all of it has been through asking, where do I go next? And what am I meant to do here? And what was interesting with Thailand in particular is that I knew that it was a stepping stone. I didn't know why, but it's ended up being a really good place to kind of solidify a lot of the projects that I was working on that have been sort of up in the air that I've been able to ground. And for me personally, has been just a very healing place.
Oh, nice. That's beautiful, and it's important. I think that there is a lot of healing going on the planet right now.
Mhm.
Some of it unconscious, some of it consciously, and I think that some of the curiosity with the spirituality is that
Mhm.
people are looking, they don't know why, but they're looking for some level of healing, and sometimes they don't honestly even know what they're healing as they're being seekers. So that's interesting. The other thing that I'll say to you, Sonee, is, and I'll say this has been since probably January of this year, one of the consistent things that have been coming up in the podcast shows that I do, the happy hour for the spiritually curious, to the point where I started just adding it as a question here and there, is nature and the importance of nature with a lot of the energetic things that are happening with this shift. And what I'll say to you is some of the most spiritual people I know, if you even want to term that, whatever that means, right? Water is so significant. I feel like water, they're all drawn to the water. I hear the exact same thing that you say, and that there's something that brings them there. Water is one of the elements, right? Which someone told me wasn't native to the earth because it didn't have any carbon, but that's a whole different conversation. But it does, as this is where my mind goes in any conversation, as I'm thinking that really it seems like high vibrational people are in their high vibrational moments of life, really get drawn to the water. But I will tell you, all of the conversations, I would say all, have gone
Mhm.
back to nature and the importance of nature, and how people on their journey are really leveraging nature to manage through a lot of what's happening right now.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is, I was going to say nature is one of the reasons I was drawn to Thailand. But really, you know, in terms of connecting with your intuition and having a particularly grounded spiritual practice, and by that I mean just understanding that our spirituality is part of who we are, is part of our day to day. It doesn't have to be, reserved for those sacred moments or sacred spaces, but it is something that is inherent in all of us. It's just, do we decide to give it the attention that we want to give it? But nature is a beautiful way to connect with spirituality. Something as simple as, where I am in Thailand, there's a whole bunch of birds. I wake up every morning hearing birds chirping, and that in and of itself is so relaxing. Just the sound of the waves is also just, I mean, it takes you, it sort of helps you transcend to a different level. And it's effortless, right? If you're in nature, you don't really have to do anything, quote unquote, other than be in it and immerse yourself in that environment. And it's so vital to healing, to our vitality, to our connection, and to realize that we're just a small part of the cosmos. And that really, the more connected we feel to nature and to the planet, the more connected we are to each other.
Yeah, that oneness, and the oneness isn't just
Mm-hmm.
humans. So I would agree. So you mentioned the grounded spirituality. Do you have other practices, or can you talk a little bit more about grounded spirituality?
Absolutely. So, grounded spirituality for me is, it's just understanding that, and this wasn't something that I learned from the get go. It took time to get to this point where it used to be that I would only get messages from spirit or the universe or source or whatever you want to call it when I was still, when I had my moments of stillness, when I was meditating, when I was praying, when I was doing special, so either rituals or things like this. And it has evolved to a place where I don't necessarily need them. I can see connections, and these connections are open to all of us. It's not just me. It's not, I don't have this unique ability. And it can be something as simple as, seeing numbers, repeating numbers. Those are ways that the universe is telling us they're connecting and they're sending a message to us. Seeing animals, particular animals, and especially if you run into them over a period of time, or if it's something that you see once in a blue moon kind of thing. The moon, the phases of the moon, the cycles that the earth goes through, even conversations that you can have with people. Like, you think like, oh, it's a coincidence that somebody mentioned this topic and I was thinking about it. Well, no, it's not a coincidence. It's the way that universe is connecting with you or communicating with you. And if you're present and in that moment grounded, you will see it and you will recognize it and you'll say, oh, so you're just telling me that, reinforcing the thought that I've already had. And where intuition, that you were saying, that has come up a lot, is that it's up to you and your intuition to interpret that message. It could be just something, let's say we were talking about dogs and somebody else comes up and starts talking about dogs. It could mean that the universe is telling you, yes, go, get a dog, or it could just be that the universe is saying to you, I'm here, I'm paying attention, so connect with me in a deeper level. And but you only know that based on what your intuition is telling you that that message represents. It's not, a universal sort of understanding of it. It's an individual understanding.
So it's very personalized. Universe personalizes things for us for our unique expression that we are as humans.
Yeah, and the key to it is the intuition, and that's why I think it's such an important component of any kind of spiritual practice, because that's how we know our individual interpretation of whatever the circumstances are, the messages, or whatever it is that the universe is trying to communicate to us.
I love it. You mentioned this. We were gifted to have you talk about oracle cards on day one, Thursday. And I did want to comment on it, your tagline that you use on your website and your emails,
Mm-hmm.
trust in your soul.
Trust in your soul.
Like that so caught my attention when
Yes.
I've looked at your website and your emails. So now that I get to talk to you, I love it. What does trust in your soul mean to you?
Trust in your soul is how I summarize my spiritual journey, and in fact my journey through life, because our journey through life is a spiritual journey whether we want to accept it or not.
Exactly.
And it's part of what we started our conversation with, which is learning to be yourself. And the way that you learn to be yourself is to communicate with your soul and to honor its guidance, honor where it's taking you, honor that you're not just a body in this existence, but you have a bigger purpose. And that is the only way that you're infinite is through your soul. The only way that you're expansive, the only way that you are able to never cease to be is through your soul. And so if you trust in your soul, you know that you're headed in the right direction, even though you don't know what the ultimate destination is.
Being in the flow, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. That it just really strikes me every time I see it. So I'll say nicely done. Because I'm guessing I'm not the only one that it grabs their attention. So throughout the summit, we talked a lot about 100% service to others is equally as important as 100% service to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say with you, as with honestly every presenter who gave of themselves to be here for the last 3 days to, put themselves out there and help people, I think that we all do well with 100% service to others, like really well,
Mm-hmm.
but perhaps a bit of an imbalance for many of us, not all of us, but I could say for me personally. Can you talk a little bit about what 100% service to yourself looks like or would look like?
Well, that is, I will be honest, something that I struggle with a lot. I tend to prioritize others over myself, and definitely prioritize giving to others versus giving to myself. And this is one of the ways where a grounded spiritual practice definitely helps, because another way that spirit communicates to us is through our body. The sensations in our body, aches, illnesses, ailments, feelings, emotions, which some people say are through our body. They may or they may not be, but definitely if you don't allow the emotions to come out, they will sit in your body. So eventually it becomes about your body. And so one of the things that I have started to do, which I'm getting better at, is asking my body, what do you need? What do I need to do for you? I'll be honest, I've had this practice, in fact, for a while. What was missing for me, which is what I have started doing, is actually acknowledging it and doing it. So, for instance, if I was tired and really felt like I needed a nap, I would forget it. I'd just drink a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and just kind of push forward.
I hear you.
And now I've started saying, well, if I am not here for myself, or if I am not here in a way where I am healthy, I will not be there for other people. And so that's been a huge change that I have actually been able to do since I've been in Thailand. I wouldn't have said that I was very successful before then, but in that space, in that environment, and perhaps it's because it's so different from where I had been before, that I have become more open to it. But yeah, self-care for me, or serving myself, is actually following what my body's telling me to do.
Good for you. Yeah, that whole idea of like, oh, yeah, you are tired. You're allowed to take a nap. You're allowed to rest. It just, as you were talking, I was like, it's so logical and it makes sense. And certainly that would be what we would be telling the people we serve. But when it comes to ourselves, it seems just so foreign. So I'm gonna heed your words, because I'm guessing they were words that I also needed to hear. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And that, the one thing was interesting is that somebody asked me once, when was the last time you took a nap and didn't set an alarm?
Oh wow,
And I was like,
that's.
oh.
We're going to talk
You
about
just,
spiritual exploration challenges in a little later. But I'm thinking that would be a nice spiritual exploration challenge for the audience that's listening when we talk about 100% service to ourselves. So I'll let you throw that out there.
I will. I will, because that ended up being a very big challenge for me.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I think that it would be a big challenge for a lot of people.
Yep. Especially with our society being so driven by doing,
Yes.
and feeling that if we don't do, or if we don't accomplish, or if we don't tick things off the list, then we're not, performing, or we're not enough, or we're not
Mm-hmm.
worthy, or whatever it is, to actually just allow yourself to sleep for as long as your body needs to sleep.
I feel like this is going to be incorporated in a novel that lets you be yourself, right? And not all the messaging that you get from other people. Sorry, I couldn't help myself with that. But it very well could be, right?
It very well could be.
That being said, what is Sonee Singh up to these days, and what's next on the horizon for you? I know
Well, we
that's a
had our
big
session.
question, I think.
It is. And we had our session earlier with the Oracle deck that is coming up in the next few weeks. So it hasn't been launched yet, but it's a beautiful project. It's called Daily Divine. It's reflections to connect within. And so it's 77 cards that help you they have a message, they have a reflection, and also a prompt to either contemplate, journal, meditate, whatever it is that you feel like doing. And so that should be coming up in the next few weeks. But after that, I have more poetry that's coming. So I've completed the next set of poetry books. I don't have release dates for them yet because we're still going through the whole process that needs to go through publishing, but hopefully I will have more information on that soon.
So is it going to be another series of 3, and is there a theme with each one, or is there a theme with the set, or?
So at the moment, the thing with the series of 3, which are the books that are sitting actually right there, those were quite thick poetry books. A poetry book is normally, one would say, around 50 poems, and those have about 100 poems each. So they're quite
They have
hefty.
beautiful. I have some. They have beautiful artwork in them also. Beautiful poems and beautiful artwork.
Yes.
They're nice books.
Yes, they're beautiful books. Actually, the illustrator did a really good job with the artwork.
So did the author.
Thank you. And so these that are upcoming are going to be simpler in the sense that each book is probably less than 50 poems. And they follow my most recent journey. So the way that I explain my writing is my novels are about my fictional characters and my poetry is myself.
Oh.
So that's where I express my either my own healing, my own thoughts, my own experiences. And this set, it's called Renaissance. And it's part of a rediscovery of myself because even though, we've been talking about going on a personal journey and trusting in your soul, it's also embracing the fact that the soul is evolving and changing, and that even if you think you're going in one direction, that direction can shift, and that is okay. And so that's that exploration of me starting with searching for a home. So again, what we talked about earlier with my travels, how it evolved into so much more, because it was a journey also of finding a deeper layer of myself, love, forgiveness, health, strength, the ability to manifest, and then eventually to transcend and get to a higher place, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but definitely a different level of existence for me.
I really love that you use the word Renaissance, and that's such a great way to describe what you've gone through. And more recently, what's interesting to me is when you talk about pay attention to your intuition, is it a coincidence and it not? Is I've really been looking at with this shift globally that we're going through a huge renaissance, both with countries, the US, the European Alliance, all of the continents, with technology, well, like with everything. I feel like everything that has to do with this earth plane is going through a huge renaissance. So it's interesting to me, if the greater is going through the renaissance, then the micro is going to go through a renaissance, right?
Absolutely. And that's a thing when, talking about connection and oneness, is that we think we are alone in our journey, or we think we're the only person going through this, or we think that, a country is a unique scenario, but we're all sort of in this together.
Oh.
It's just, it takes a different aspect, or it presents itself or manifests itself in a different way. And so your journey of Renaissance is different from mine, is different from the next person, but everybody's going through a similar process.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you for being authentic and putting yourself out there with that.
Well, it'll be even more so when the poems come out, because there's some deep exploration there, even in myself and in my own healing, and things have been holding me back, including, things that we all have, negative self-thoughts and,
Sure.
yeah, self-limiting beliefs, all these things, yeah.
That self-talk thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the oracle cards, you have the books. That all seems pretty tied up, other
Right.
than, you've just got to put the bow on it, pretty much. So what's next?
So I am starting to work on a novel. So funny, what you said could actually make it in there, because the spiritual aspect is always a component in my novels. And I always try to explore something spiritual that the person or the character, the protagonist, is going through. Whether, it's a part of a discovery of themselves, but they each take a different journey. And so one of the questions that always comes up for me when I'm looking at a novel is, what path is this person going to take, and what are the avenues or the tools or the resources or the people that are going to present themselves. So you never know, this might actually be there.
Well, there you go. How cool will that be?
Yeah.
I love it. So needless to say, you've kept yourself busy both professionally and personally.
I have.
With things
intertwining.
Good for you. And I'm really eager to hear where you end up next.
Yeah, me too. I don't know.
You do make your way around the globe, which I think is a beautiful thing, personally.
Yeah, I'm fortunate in that way, that I do have the ability to do that. So I'm grateful.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about this spiritual exploration challenge. Do you have a spiritual exploration challenge for the viewers?
As you've mentioned, trust in your soul is the tagline that I always use. And so my spiritual exploration challenge for the viewers would be, what is your soul calling you to do?
I like that. And some thoughts. So someone's at home, they're listening to it, and they're like, oh man, that's beautiful. I'm going to do that. And then they click off and they're like, I don't know how to do that. Some thoughts to help. Well, because that's what happens, right? I mean, I'm that person, I'll be honest with you, where I'm like, I'm all in. It sounds really great. And then I sit down and think about how I'm going to action it. And then I'm like, did I actually understand what I thought was really good? And how do I action that? So some help with people with that?
So one of the things that I end up doing, and because writing is such a big thing for me, is I start writing about it, just seeing what comes up. And I don't judge the writing. I don't limit myself. I don't sit around and think like, oh, okay, I'm going to talk about, what is my soul calling? Let's just say it's saying travel. And so I don't think, travel, where should I travel to? I just start writing about travel. And it doesn't matter if what comes out is complete entire gibberish, because the purpose is not to come up with something coherent, but the purpose is for you to get out of the way so that your soul comes through and the message from your soul comes through. And if you just sort of say, okay, well, I'm going to travel, but what is the first thing that I want to do? I have no idea what the first thing is that I have to do. I think this is silly, but it maybe if I continue writing, it'll come up. And you just sort of let yourself be in that moment and in that space. Your next action step will become clearer, or at least a direction will become a lot more clearer once you finish with the exercise. And if you don't know how long to write for, you can set a timer for 20 minutes and just stream of conscious for 20 minutes and see whatever comes out. And if today you didn't get an answer, try it again tomorrow and do another 20 minutes until you get to that space.
Okay, I like that. That makes sense. So it would be not, and because we feel this way, I think a lot because, this is sort of how we've been programmed. We don't have to pick. So a lot of times we're picking and forcing the universe. Maybe I'm not a good picker. And we can force the universe into giving us something that may or not have been in our best interest or the best choice, versus your method that you just talked about opens a portal or a conduit or whatever word, we want to use to allow
Mm-hmm.
the energy of the divine, the unseen, the all that is, however you want to language it, to assist with the process. Because we always feel like we have to do it, right?
Exactly.
I have to come up with the outcome and I have to figure out how that outcome comes. Like I have to figure out all the how-tos with my grand thing that I've manifested, which I think that would be in my best interest,
Mm-hmm.
but isn't in your best interest.
Right.
It's like I want to win the lottery, but then you read about all these people who run the lottery and it wasn't such a good thing for them. you know,
Exactly. And that's a thing that you hit the nail on the head, that we think that we have to figure it out and that we have to come up with the how. So, okay, I'm going to travel. And so, what is the next step? Let me try to figure out where I'm going to go and find the flights and get the hotels or whatever it is that you need to do, and start sort of listing things so that you can take things off. But maybe the question isn't that. Maybe the question is, you know, explore, talk to other people. Maybe, an opportunity will present itself that you were not open to, and that you may not be open to because you're so focused on getting your structure done or your plan or your outcome, that you ignored the bigger message, which was perhaps you're meant to be part of a tour. Perhaps somebody will come up to you and say, hey, how about we go on a road trip? Something else might come up that you may have otherwise dismissed, but because now you're open and you're exploring, you'll allow for this opportunity to present itself.
Okay, so I'm just going to throw this out there. Maybe it's a little off tangent. Maybe it's not. So we met
Yes.
traveling on a tour group. And what was interesting is as people got to know each other, is most of the people
Mm-hmm.
traveled alone. Most of the people had a really unique story about how it came on their plate and they ended up there.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the people on that tour still are connected.
Yes.
And it was almost a reconnection.
Mm-hmm.
Within the first 2 or 3 days, it was like some people clued in a lot quicker than I did. But it was almost like, oh, this is actually a reconnection. It's interesting how that works out. And I believe that the universe brought us all together, and
Mm-hmm.
very random, because it was very random how many of us ended up there. And it was a life-changing experience, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, at least for me, I had intended at some point in my life to go to Egypt. I didn't think that it was going to happen in that way. And it was this openness of, I started seeing pyramids in meditations, advertisements. Sometimes I'd draw cards and I'd see a pyramid and kept on thinking, like, am I going to go to Egypt? Like, that's so weird. And and because I'd connected with Sarah Wiseman, who was one of the people in the summit whom you've had, it was through her that the opportunity came up, and I signed up for it without even understanding what I was signing up for. And in fact, it wasn't until I got there that I understood what I signed up for. And perhaps I didn't. I actually don't think I did. I think I got there and was like, what the heck is happening here?
Well, so I did an episode with one of the other people with it, and I shared at the beginning of the episode, I was like, I texted a friend of mine and I was like, this is really cool. There's a lot of special people here. These people have some really unique gifts. I don't know how I fit in. My first 2 days, these were my texts back to my friend, over in the States, because I was living in the Middle East at the time. And then, a lot of stuff started happening. And,
Yeah.
I don't even know by the end
Mm-hmm.
it was clear. It took me a while. I'm not going to lie. It took me a while to process that trip. And literally, I just did the show in January. And that was because a lot of people kept asking, you reference this a lot, but you talk a lot about anything, but this is one thing that you won't talk about. And I thought, okay, at some point I seemed like I felt like I was ready. And
Mm-hmm.
even doing the show helped me process some more things. So when, the reason I bring it up is that as you were talking about using your intuition and waiting and sort of seeing what's going to happen, for me, that and because it was a shared experience with the two of
Mm-hmm.
us, that I think is continued shared experience, especially after that card you pulled with your oracle presentation.
Mm-hmm.
This is really how it works. I mean, it may sound like out in left field to some people who are newer to this, but I mean, that's how, I'm that person, but I get things on a whole different level now. So that's the other thing I would put out there, perhaps, and you've said it a lot of different ways, is, be patient with yourself.
You don't have to have it all figured out, because that's not what it's about.
Give yourself some grace. And honestly, it's so much easier when you don't. I'm not going to say that it's like, you want me to do what? I still have those moments, but it's so much easier, honestly, when I'm not controlling it. Although in the beginning, I may be like, yeah, this isn't resonating with me, but okay, I'll give it a try. And the next thing you know, I just told you that I'm on some bizarre life path here. Didn't see that coming.
Or I'm living in Thailand this year.
Well, that's when you said that. I was like, oh, I wonder when she ended up in Thailand. I'll have to ask her about that.
Yes. It's when you start paying attention and just trusting, which is such a hard thing to do.
Trust. Oh, that's the word. I get that word all the time. Yes. Trust. Which hard. I know, but I don't put it into practice, right? Or that. And as you said, a lot of it is then take action. It's really important to take action. Sonee, if someone wants to connect with you, I know you have the angel cards out there. I know you have the books out there. I'm not exactly sure what other things that you're doing, but, I think that there might be some people here who are listening to you and that will be listening to this in the future who might want to reach out to you. How would they do that? What does it look like?
You have a website. It's soneesingh.com. I have an email. It's very easy. Sonee@soneesingh.com. You can reach out to me. I love to hear from people. And I'm also on social media. My handle is @soneesingauthor.com. I mean, not .com, @soneesingauthor.
Yeah, you keep it very simple. I love it.
Yeah. It makes it easier to remember.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to put out there as we're truly not just finishing this up, but finishing up 3 incredibly special days that have been special on many, many levels?
I think reinforcing the idea that nothing happens as a coincidence. And so if somebody has been a part of this and has been listening, trust it as a message, trust it as spirit and universe asking you to be here at this time, and then take time to reflect and come up with some action that you want to take based on what you have listened, what you've integrated from all of the sessions. And, it doesn't have to be big. It can be something really small and simple, but do make sure that you take that action.
I don't know that if you have it where you're at right now. You pulled a card for me.
Mm-hmm. I do.
And I think it sort of fits in with the last message that you left for some people. And it was really interesting because it was a title that I used when I had Sonee on the Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious podcast in its infancy way back when. So when you pull the card, it was like, I think that goes right with the message that you just left people. Sometimes, we still get caught up in our third dimensional self, and there can be some fear there. Mm-hmm. Feel it. It can be a positive thing.
Yes.
Maybe as you were talking, and I thought maybe that was, there was many reasons for that card with messages between Sonee and I.
Yes.
But at the end, I think that it may be the ending message for people also. So thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate you. I appreciate all that you're doing. I really look forward to our continued work together. The last thing that I'll throw out there is if people have been following the summit for the past 3 days, they know that you have gifted us with some pre-recorded poems that you have put out there. And I felt intuitively, extremely strongly that the way to end the summit was with a special poem that you picked out. So as we finish up, I'll let everyone know that, we're going to do a very brief wrap up, and we're just going to close this out with the poem. So thank you.
Well, thank you for allowing me to have the space and time and to share some of my words with people.
Thanks. Until next time. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Wild Soul Gatherings Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. To learn more about our guests, please go to our website, wildsoulsgathering.com. We're very eager to hear from our listeners what you thought of the episode, topics you might like us to cover in the future, your thoughts on spirituality, questions you may have. Please feel free to send us an email at wildsoulsgathering@gmail.com. This is your host, Dr. Sandra Marie, sending each of you peace and love. Until we meet again, embrace your wild soul.